December 1980, a United States Air Force base in England. Security personnel investigate lights in the forest and discover something that should not exist. A triangular craft, radiation levels 10 times normal, landing gear impressions in frozen soil. The deputy base commander leads the investigation personally. He records audio evidence, takes measurements, photographs the site, then everything disappears. The film, the soil samples, the witnesses scattered across different continents. But one recording survived, and the radiation is still there today. This is the Rendlesham Forest Incident, the most documented military UFO encounter in history. And what happened in those woods changed everything we thought we knew about what shares our skies. This is that classified story. The official record states there was no defense significance. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt knew that was a lie the moment he signed the non-disclosure agreement in January 1981. 23 years of service, impeccable record, and they handed him a document that legally erased 3 nights of his life. The kind of paperwork that comes from above top secret, the kind that arrives in manila envelopes without postmarks. RAF Woodbridge sat 12 miles from the North Sea, a forward operating location for the United States Air Force during the Cold War's frozen zenith. December 1980. The base housed a 10 Thunderbolts and maintained nuclear weapon storage facilities under protocols so compartmentalized that even the British Ministry of Defense maintained plausible deniability. Halt served as deputy base commander, responsible for security operations across both Woodbridge and its twin installation at RAF Bentwaters. His service record included 2 tours in Vietnam and a commendation for tactical excellence during the Tet Offensive. Not a man prone to hallucinations or hysteria. The first call came through at 0300 hours on December 26th. Security patrol reporting lights in Rendlesham Forest, approximately 200 meters beyond the East Gate perimeter. Initial assessment, aircraft crash. Halt dispatched Sergeant James Peniston and Airman First Class John Burroughs to investigate. Standard protocol. Secure the site, assess casualties, establish communications. They returned 4 hours later. Peniston's hands trembled as he filled out the incident report. Burroughs refused to speak at all for 6 hours. Halt read Peniston's report 3 times before requesting the base commander's authorization to conduct a formal investigation. The sergeant described a triangular craft, approximately 3 meters tall and 3 meters across at the base, constructed from a material that resembled black glass but generated no reflection. Symbols inscribed along the surface. Peniston claimed he touched it. His notebook contained 30 pages of binary code he said appeared in his mind during the contact. The craft departed vertically without sound, accelerating to impossible speeds within seconds. Base Commander Colonel Gordon Williams authorized the follow-up investigation personally. Unusual. Williams typically delegated such matters. He accompanied Halt to the landing site on December 28th, bringing a Geiger counter, photographic equipment, and a handheld audio recorder. The forest at night possessed a quality Halt would later struggle to articulate. Not silence exactly. The absence of natural sound. No wind through the pines, no animal movement, as though the woods themselves held breath. They found the landing site within 20 minutes. 3 depressions in the frozen soil, arranged in an equilateral triangle, each depression approximately 7 inches deep and 16 inches in diameter. Halt measured them personally. The soil exhibited compression patterns inconsistent with any known aircraft landing gear. His engineering background, the 4 years at Virginia Tech before his commission, gave him enough knowledge to recognize impossibility when he measured it. The weight distribution suggested an object of at least 25 tons. No scorching, no propulsion residue, just perfect geometric indentations in earth that should not have supported such mass without catastrophic deformation. The Geiger counter began clicking before they reached the depressions. Background radiation at Woodbridge measured 0.1 milliroentgens per hour, standard atmospheric levels. Halt's counter registered 0.7 at the landing site perimeter. 1 full milliroentgen at the depression centers, 7 times background, 10 times in the soil samples they collected. He photographed everything, 37 images. The film would later disappear from the base photographic laboratory. The logbook showing its check-in would be removed. 20 years later, the laboratory technician would admit under anonymous interview that 2 men in civilian clothes confiscated the materials within 72 hours. Williams stood at the edge of the landing zone, the Geiger counters clicking steady in the frozen air. Halt activated his audio recorder. His voice on the tape, declassified in 2001 through FOIA request, carried the flat effect of a man forcing professional composure over existential vertigo. Here I am in the middle of a forest. This is unreal. The lights appeared at 0130 hours, not forest lights, not aircraft, objects that defied conventional description. Halt watched through light intensification equipment as multiple sources maneuvered through the trees. They moved with deliberate precision, changing direction without deceleration, passing through physical barriers without deviation. One descended near the security perimeter. Halt approached to within 50 meters. The object pulsed with colors that shouldn't exist together, reds that hurt to observe, blues that seemed to originate from somewhere other than the visible spectrum. Then it split. A single source became 5. They arranged themselves in formation above the tree line, geometric precision that suggested coordination beyond mechanical autopilot. Halt's audio recorder captured his running commentary, the profanity. The measurements called out to his team, the moment when one of the objects directed a beam of light downward, directly at the nuclear weapons storage area. The beam remained active for approximately 40 seconds, silent. No heat signature, no electromagnetic interference with their equipment. When it terminated, the objects accelerated beyond visual tracking within 3 seconds. The light intensification equipment registered their departure vectors, speeds exceeding 3,000 miles per hour. No sonic boom, no atmospheric displacement. Williams ordered an immediate stand down. The investigation team returned to base. Halt filed his memorandum the following morning, documenting the entire encounter with clinical precision. Radiation levels, exact coordinates, witness testimony from multiple security personnel with secret clearances. The memorandum went through proper channels. Deputy Base Commander to Base Commander to 3rd Air Force Headquarters to United States Air Forces in Europe. The Ministry of Defense response arrived 6 weeks later. Single page, official letterhead. The incident posed no defense significance. No further investigation warranted. Halt knew the response was fabricated the moment Williams showed it to him. The colonel's expression carried something Halt had never seen before. Not fear exactly. Recognition. Williams had served in strategic intelligence before taking command at Bentwaters. Whatever he knew, whatever briefing he'd received, it came from classification levels that didn't officially exist. The photographs vanished first, then the soil samples from the base laboratory. The audio cassette Halt personally sealed and logged disappeared from the evidence locker. Only his personal copy survived, the one he kept in his quarters against every protocol. 7 airmen who participated in the investigation received immediate transfer orders within 60 days. Different bases, different commands, different continents. Peniston's notebook with the binary code remained in his possession only because he never logged it as evidence. 23 years later, a computer analyst would decode the sequences, geographic coordinates, longitude and latitude for locations that included the Great Pyramid, Sedona, Arizona, and coordinates in the Atlantic Ocean where no landmass existed. The final sequence translated to a year 8100. Williams retired in 1982. Before his death in 2021, he gave one interview to a researcher investigating the Rendlesham Incident. The recording exists, His voice carries the weight of 4 decades carrying classified knowledge. I briefed generals, full-bird colonels. They told me what I saw was real. They told me it had happened before. They told me to keep my mouth shut. The photographs still exist somewhere. They have the photos. Halt filed his FOIA request in 1998, seeking his own memorandum and supporting documentation. The Air Force released the memo in 2001, heavily redacted, supporting materials classified under national security exemption, the radiation data, the photographic evidence, the witness testimony from 12 additional personnel whose names never appeared in official accounts. 42 years later, the landing site still registers elevated radiation. Independent researchers measured it in 2014, 0.4 milliroentgens, 4 times background. The trees in the immediate vicinity exhibit growth abnormalities, bark patterns that spiral in directions inconsistent with natural cellular development. Soil composition showing silicon ratios found nowhere else in the forest. Halt knows what he saw, what he measured, what he documented according to every protocol his training demanded. The object was real. The radiation was real. The fact that his superiors knew exactly what he'd encountered, that they had protocols already in place for such events, that confirmation came from classification levels he'd never accessed in 23 years of service. That reality proved more terrifying than the craft itself. The summons arrived on January 15, 1981, not through normal channels. A staff car appeared outside Halt's quarters at 0600, driver presenting orders signed by 3rd Air Force Commander Lieutenant General Robert Basley himself. Report to RAF Mildenhall, Building 579, Room 14. Alone, no documentation. Halt recognized the protocol immediately. Compartmentalized briefing, need-to-know basis, the kind of meeting that never appeared on official schedules. Building 579 sat in the restricted section of Mildenhall, behind double fencing and biometric access points installed during upgrades most personnel assumed were standard Cold War security measures. Halt had never been inside. The room was windowless, acoustically isolated, swept for recording devices according to procedures visible in the equipment positioned near the door. 3 men waited. 2 wore civilian suits cut in a style that suggested federal authority without identifying which agency. The third was Brigadier General Harvey Schwartz, USAF Deputy Chief of Staff for Intelligence. No introductions. Schwartz gestured to a chair. One of the civilians placed a folder on the table. Manila. No markings. Inside, Halt recognized his own memorandum, the photographs that had vanished from the base laboratory, and documents he'd never seen. Radiation analysis, spectroscopic data from soil samples, witness testimony transcripts from personnel he hadn't interviewed. The investigation had continued without his knowledge, at classification levels he couldn't access. The first civilian spoke with the flat intonation of someone accustomed to delivering information that shattered worldviews. What you encountered on December 26th through 28th is designated under Project Aquarius subsection Tango 7. This briefing is classified top secret Umbra with SPCAT handling. You will sign acknowledgement that unauthorized disclosure carries penalties under the Espionage Act, including possible capital punishment. Do you understand? Halt understood. Umbra classification existed above top secret. Special category handling meant information compartmentalized even within intelligence communities. He signed. The second civilian opened another folder. RAF Woodbridge is the 17th documented incident of this nature on NATO installations since 1947, the 8th on British soil, the 3rd involving direct observation by commissioned officers with security clearances. Your encounter matches established patterns with 94% correlation. The objects you observed are of non-terrestrial origin. This is not speculation. This is confirmed fact based on material analysis and technological assessment conducted over 3 decades. The room possessed the sterile quiet of revelation. Halt's hands remained steady on the table. His mind categorized the information with the same discipline that had kept him functional through firebase attacks in Vietnam. Non-terrestrial, not experimental aircraft, not Soviet technology. The implicit confirmation that humanity shared the universe with technological civilizations whose capabilities exceeded understanding. Schwartz leaned forward. The radiation signatures you recorded match isotope ratios inconsistent with terrestrial nuclear processes. The elements are correct. Uranium 235, plutonium 239, but the decay chains are wrong. The half-life calculations don't align with any known reactor design or weapons manufacturing residue. Whatever power source those craft utilize, it operates on principles our physics cannot currently explain. The first civilian continued. The binary code Sergeant Peniston recorded contains information we've been unable to fully decrypt. The coordinates are clear. Historical sites, geographic anomalies. The temporal reference to 8100 suggests either a date system we don't understand or information about an event 8,000 years in the future. We don't know which. What we do know is that similar codes have appeared in 3 other contact events, different locations, different witnesses, identical encryption methodology. Halt processed the implications, multiple incidents, consistent patterns, an intelligence apparatus that had been studying this phenomenon for decades while maintaining absolute public denial. The Ministry of Defense letter claiming no defense significance was precisely what it appeared to be. Institutional lying elevated to operational protocol. "What happened to the photographs?" Halt asked. The second civilian's expression didn't change. "They're in a facility you don't have clearance to know exists, along with physical materials recovered from the landing site. Soil samples showing metallurgical contamination from alloys that require manufacturing processes beyond current technological capability. We know the composition. We cannot replicate it. The gap between observation and understanding is where your security oath becomes critical." Schwartz produced another document, transfer orders. Halt would remain at Bentwaters through his scheduled rotation in June 1984. No early reassignment, no public statements, complete cooperation with ongoing investigation activities he would not be briefed on. His personnel file would be flagged with a classification marker that would follow him through any future assignment. Certain career paths would become unavailable. Promotions requiring Senate confirmation would never materialize. The price of knowing what he now knew. The objects demonstrated tactical awareness, the first civilian stated. They illuminated the weapons storage facility, not the flight line, not the command center. The specific location containing special weapons. That suggests intelligence gathering, reconnaissance. The beam you observed may have been sensor technology. It may have been something else. We've documented similar incidents at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, RAF Lakenheath, and Loring Air Force Base in Maine. Every case involved nuclear weapons storage or missile facilities. The pattern was clear. Whatever intelligence operated those craft possessed specific interest in humanity's nuclear capabilities. Whether that interest indicated threat assessment, technological curiosity, or something else entirely remained unknown. What was known, what the data confirmed across multiple incidents, was that the phenomenon focused on humanity's most destructive weapon systems with precision that eliminated coincidence. Halt thought about the airmen he'd led into the forest. Peniston, who still flinched at unexpected sounds. Burroughs, who'd requested psychiatric evaluation before withdrawing the request, under circumstances he refused to discuss. The others, transferred to different continents, careers quietly derailed through reassignments that looked routine but served to scatter witnesses across the military command structure. Institutional trauma management masquerading as normal personnel rotation. "What do they want?" Halt asked. The room stayed silent for 5 seconds. Then Schwartz answered, If we knew that, Colonel, this briefing would be happening at a very different classification level. What we know is they've been here a long time. The earliest documented incident with physical evidence dates to 1933. Nazi Germany, a crash site in the Black Forest, materials recovered, witness testimony from Wehrmacht officers. The technology gap between observation and replication was even larger then. Some researchers believe that gap inspired certain experimental programs. Die Glocke, anti-gravity research. Whether the Nazis achieved any functional understanding before collapse is uncertain. What we recovered from their facilities after the war is still being analyzed. The second civilian added, "The Soviet Union has parallel programs. We know from intelligence intercepts that they have experienced similar incidents. The competition isn't just terrestrial anymore. It's about who can understand what we're seeing fast enough to gain strategic advantage, assuming understanding is even possible." Halt recognized the subtext. The Cold War possessed a third participant, one that neither superpower could control, negotiate with, or comprehend. The nuclear arsenals aimed at each other represented power that had attracted attention from civilizations with capabilities that made ICBMs look like Bronze Age spears. The balance of terror had cosmic witnesses. The briefing lasted 90 minutes. Halt signed 7 additional documents, non-disclosure agreements, security acknowledgments, a statement confirming he understood that discussing this information with anyone lacking proper clearance, including his wife, would result in immediate court-martial and federal prosecution. The folder was collected. No copies, no notes. The information existed only in his memory and in files stored in facilities whose locations remained classified. The staff car returned him to Bentwaters at 1100 hours. His schedule showed a routine day. Administrative meetings, training oversight, the mundane operations of a deputy base commander at a Cold War installation. Nothing in his expression or behavior suggested that his understanding of reality had undergone fundamental revision. That night, alone in his quarters, Halt stood at the window overlooking the flight line. Somewhere above the English countryside, objects moved through the sky with capabilities that violated physics as humanity understood it. They had been there before his observation. They would be there after. The only variable was human awareness. And awareness, he now understood, came with a price measured in career limitation, institutional isolation, and the weight of carrying knowledge that could never be shared. Gordon Williams never attended the briefing. His security clearance exceeded Halt's. Whatever he knew, whatever additional briefings he'd received, remained compartmentalized at levels Halt couldn't access. They never discussed it. Professional courtesy, or perhaps survival instinct. Some truths were too dangerous for even private conversation. Halt retired from the Air Force in 1991. Honorable discharge, full pension, a career that culminated at colonel instead of the general star his early service record had predicted. The classification marker in his personnel file had done its work silently, efficiently, eliminating him from consideration for positions requiring deeper security clearances or public visibility. He never complained. Men who knew what he knew understood the terms of the bargain. He kept the audio cassette, the one piece of physical evidence that remained in his possession, because he'd violated protocol by maintaining a personal copy. For 11 years, it sat in a safe deposit box in Ipswich. Then, in 1998, he filed the FOIA request, not because he expected success, because the act of requesting created a paper trail that offered minimal protection against the alternative. Men who kept silent sometimes had accidents. Men who formally engaged the bureaucratic process became harder to disappear without questions. The Air Force released his memorandum in 2001, redacted but recognizable. The supporting documentation remained classified under National Security Exemption 1.4a, information that could reasonably be expected to cause exceptionally grave damage to national security if disclosed. Halt read the denial letter 3 times. Exceptionally grave damage, from photographs of landing site depressions and radiation measurements. The classification level confirmed what the briefing had implied. The phenomenon wasn't historical curiosity. It was active, ongoing, and considered strategically significant at the highest levels of government. James Penniston made contact in 2004. Not directly. Through a researcher named Linda Moulton Howe, who'd spent 20 years investigating military encounters with unidentified craft. Penniston had undergone hypnotic regression, attempting to recover memories from the contact event that his conscious mind had suppressed. Under hypnosis, he had recalled receiving the binary code not through auditory or visual means, but as direct information transfer. Touch-based data transmission that bypassed language and encoded knowledge directly into memory structures. A computer programmer named Nick Sisk had decoded the complete sequence, 16 pages of ones and zeros translating to geographic coordinates and a message: exploration of humanity for the advancement of humanity. The coordinates included locations Halt recognized from the briefing he'd received 23 years earlier, but 3 new locations had appeared in Penniston's regression memories, coordinates the 1981 briefing hadn't mentioned. Sedona, Arizona, 34.8697 north, 111.7610 west. Nazca, Peru, 14.7390 south, 75.1300 west. High Brazil, 51.4176 north, 15.4528 west. The first 2 were real locations. The third was a phantom island from medieval cartography, a place that appeared on navigation charts for 400 years before being dismissed as myth. The coordinates placed it in the Atlantic Ocean, where no landmass existed above sea level. Halt knew enough oceanography to recognize the significance. The coordinates marked a location on the mid-Atlantic ridge where tectonic activity created underwater mountain ranges, deep, remote, inaccessible to surface vessels. He traveled to Sedona in 2006, 15 years after retirement. Not official investigation, personal curiosity coupled with the knowledge that whatever he discovered couldn't damage a career that had already reached its ceiling. The coordinates led to a location in the Red Rock Desert outside the city limits. Public land, no restricted access, no government presence, just geological formations that possessed unusual electromagnetic properties documented by multiple scientific surveys. Halt brought a Geiger counter, civilian model, less sensitive than military equipment, but adequate for detecting significant anomalies. Background radiation in Sedona measured 0.12 milliroentgens per hour, standard desert levels accounting for elevation and mineral composition. He hiked to the exact coordinates Penniston's binary code had specified. 0.65 milliroentgens, more than 5 times background. Not as extreme as the Rendlesham landing site, but statistically significant. He collected soil samples, red sandstone and iron oxide deposits consistent with the surrounding geology. Nothing obvious, no physical evidence of visitation or technological residue. But the radiation signature matched the pattern, elevated levels without identifiable source. He spent 3 days in the area, documenting measurements at different times, checking for natural explanations. Uranium deposits could create hotspots, thorium concentrations in certain rock formations. But the radiation signature was wrong. The isotope ratios, according to the portable spectrometer he'd purchased from a mining supply company, showed the same anomalies Schwartz had described in 1981. Decay chains that didn't align with terrestrial nuclear processes. On the 3rd day, he met a Hopi elder named Thomas Banyathaya near the coordinates. The encounter wasn't coincidental. Banyathaya had been watching him. The elder spoke about prophecies, about star people who had visited his ancestors, about knowledge encoded in petroglyphs that described craft descending from the sky. Warnings about humanity's path, predictions about a time when the visitors would return openly. Banyathaya asked if Halt was military. The question came with the weight of recognition. Halt admitted his service. The elder nodded. They've been coming to your bases, your weapon places. We know. Our grandfathers knew. The rock art shows them next to symbols for death and fire. They watch what you've made, what you point at each other. Halt showed him the coordinates. Bentwaters studied the numbers, then gestured toward the rock formations. This is a sacred site, portal place, where the worlds touch. Your science measures it as radiation. We understand it as doorway. Different words, same thing. He paused. The star people gave knowledge to the ancient ones, building, navigation, calendar. Then they watched us destroy ourselves, over and over. New civilization, same ending. They wonder if this time will be different. The conversation lasted 2 hours. Bentwaters described oral histories spanning millennia, accounts of craft matching what Halt had observed at Rendlesham, encounters with beings who communicated through thought rather than language. The consistency was troubling. Different cultures, different continents, different time periods, identical descriptions. When Halt asked why the visitors didn't make open contact, Bentwaters' response came with profound sadness. Because we're not ready. We can barely tolerate each other. How would we tolerate them? Your governments know this. That's why they hide it, not to protect themselves, to protect us from knowledge we'd weaponize. Halt returned to England with soil samples and measurements that confirmed what he'd suspected. The binary code wasn't random. The coordinates marked locations with documented anomalous activity spanning human history. Someone or something was directing human attention to specific places, encoding information that survivors of contact events would eventually decode and investigate. A breadcrumb trail designed to lead toward understanding while maintaining plausible deniability. Gordon Williams died in 2021. Before his death, he gave one interview. The recording circulated through research communities, analyzed by investigators who'd spent decades studying the Rendlesham Incident. Williams confirmed the photographs existed, confirmed the briefings, confirmed that the phenomenon was real and that institutional denial served strategic purposes he couldn't fully articulate even 40 years later. Halt listened to the interview 3 times. His former commander's voice carried the exhaustion of a man who'd carried classified knowledge across 4 decades, watching disclosure advocates demand truth while understanding why that truth remained locked in facilities whose existence couldn't be acknowledged. Williams spoke about the generals he'd briefed, their calm acceptance of his report, the protocols already in place for such encounters. Infrastructure suggesting the 1980 incident was routine, expected, managed. The final question asked what Williams believed. His answer: I believe we're being studied. I believe they've been here longer than we have. I believe our governments made a decision that public knowledge would cause more harm than continued secrecy. Whether that decision was correct? I don't know. I just know what I saw, what I reported. What disappeared into classification levels, I never accessed again. Halt is 79 now. The audio cassette has been digitized, analyzed by acoustic specialists, authenticated by multiple independent researchers. The landing site still shows elevated radiation. Peniston's binary code has been verified as mathematically consistent and informational rather than random. Burroughs developed medical conditions potentially linked to radiation exposure, documented in VA medical records that confirm his presence at the site. The official position hasn't changed. The Ministry of Defense maintains the incident held no defense significance. The United States Air Force confirms the memorandum's authenticity while classifying all supporting documentation. Project Aquarius, if it exists, remains beyond FOIA request reach. The photographs Williams mentioned have never surfaced. But the pattern persists. Military installations worldwide continue experiencing encounters. Pilots report objects with capabilities exceeding known technology. Radar tracks anomalies that violate physics. And occasionally, someone like Halt documents it with enough credibility that denial becomes implausible even when official. He knows what he saw, what he measured, what briefings confirmed. The craft were real. The intelligence operating them possesses technology centuries or millennia beyond human capability. They focus attention on nuclear weapons. They've been here throughout human history. And the governments that know this truth have decided that humanity isn't ready for contact. Whether that judgment protects civilization or prevents evolution towards something greater remains the question Halt can't answer. He only knows that the forest near RAF Woodbridge contains evidence that shouldn't exist, that his career ended the moment he documented what protocol demanded he investigate. That truth exists in classified files that may never be released. The stars above Rendlesham Forest hold witnesses. They've always been there, watching, waiting, measuring whether humanity can survive knowledge of what shares the universe. 42 years later, the answer remains classified. The memorandum exists. The radiation persists. The photographs are locked away. And somewhere in facilities that don't officially exist, analysts continue studying materials that prove we are not alone. That proof will remain secret until someone decides humanity is ready. Or until the visitors decide for us